All right, good evening, folks. Welcome to Monday Night Law here, August 2nd, 2024. Oh, good times. A little bit late tonight. Time slipped away real quick. Had to do my hair. I'm going to go over forms of government, and specifically the three forms of government that Montesquieu, in his Spirit of Laws. Brother Diesel D's, good to see you out there, brother. Good to see everybody over here on Telegram. This is going to be a very interesting one, and I may actually talk to the National Assembly folks about doing this Thursday night as well, because I think this really needs to be learned, especially when it comes to our particular form of government, which is a Confederate Republic. Okay? So, these things are very, very important to comprehend and then understand, stand in agreement. Because it dictates certain things, the way certain things work. It's a form of government. So just like in building, okay, they put down forms to pour concrete for the foundation of a building. Now, before the foundation is done, they do the bedrock, right? They do the work underground stuff. And I've said this before, and people have laughed at me and whatever, but I've worked in construction, and I know exactly how things are done for many years. Like underground plumbing is done. Any underground electrical is done prior to doing the foundation. There's a lot of underground work that is done. For those out there that don't quite comprehend what I'm talking about, and say, oh, well, how would you do the electrical without the walls and stuff? I'm talking about underground, before the foundation. Plumbing, the sewer line. At the time when I was talking about this before, right around the corner over here, a little pie-shaped piece of property has been hard to sell for quite some time because it's a tiny little strip of property, but I wish I would have run over and taken pictures of the ground, because they pulled electrical from off the pole over here on this side of the street, dug underground, and put the electrical in over there underground before they poured the foundation. They tore up the street to tie in the sewer before the foundation was poured. So that, in relation to that, is called fundamental law. Before you even build the form of government, it's essential to pick your fundamental law. Now, I don't want to get off into that stuff in particular, but Blackstone lays out these three fundamental laws: Roman civil law, the code; feudal law; and common law. Those are three separate jurisdictions, bodies of law. Because juris means law, diction means words. Words of law is a body of law. So as a fundamental law, it directly affects the form of government as well. So without getting into all of that, just keep that in mind. Our fundamental law here in America, in our Confederate Republic, is supposed to be the common law, not Roman civil law, the code. That was re-implemented by the Code of Civil Procedure Act, Congress 1873, and I don't know about everybody else's states, but Idaho, it was 1881. I've done the research. I found this Code of Civil Procedure Act where they implemented the code, which subverts the common law. Okay. So moving on to the big topic for the night is Montesquieu's Spirit of laws. Oh, Alberta. Is that Canada out there? Is that Sebastian Lawyer over there on YouTube? Welcome, Canada. Well, again, Blue Sky out on YouTube. You see, you use the word code. That's Roman civil law. United States Code, Code of Federal Regulations, City Code, code. Anywhere you see the word code, that's Roman civil law as a fundamental law. Doesn't belong here in our republic. So think about that long and hard, people. As long as you need. Code is Roman civil law. Good to see you, Art. All right, so let's take a look at this. Let's dive into this here. You know, we talk about states and those kinds of things, and about how America is countries and that kind of stuff. We get a little confused. So I found this over here under the Law of Nations, written by Emer-D. Vattel. This is Book 1, Chapter 19. The whole of the countries possessed by a nation and subject to its laws forms, as we have already said, its territory, and is the common country of all the individuals of the nation. So, our nation is called America. America is not a country, it is a nation. And what we consider states are actually countries within the nation. See, the whole of the countries possessed by a nation. See, it's the United States of America. America is the nation. All of the states that have united, that's what makes us a confederacy, a confederate republic, as all the states that have united, which we'll get into that here with Montesquieu. We'll explain this stuff. Break this stuff down so grammar can understand it. So, just wanted to point that out real quick before we get into all of this. So, in part here, this is kind of the overview before I go right into the main part of it. Come on. So in Book 1, which is where we're going to be starting here, men in the state of nature, abstracted from all religion, in those disputes which they may have, know no other law than that of all animals, the right of the strongest. The establishment of society ought to be regarded as a kind of a treaty against this unjust title. A treaty destined to establish a sort of balance between the different divisions of the human race. But it happens in the moral. This is virtue, as in the physical equilibrium, that it is seldom perfect and stable, and the treaties of the human race are like treaties among our princes, perpetual sources of dispute. Interest, necessity, and pleasure made men associate together. The same motives urge them continually to desire the advantages of society without the burdens of it. And it is in this sense that we may say, with our author, that men, from the time they entered society, are in a state of war. For war supposes in those who make it, if not an equality of strength, at least an assumption of this equality. whence arise the mutual desire and hope of conquest. Now, in a state of society, see, it's a state of something. So, like when we say state, it's actually a nation state. And like here in America, we are independent sovereign nation states, but that's what makes it a country. But it's a state of being. Now, in a state of society, if the balance among men be never perfect, neither is it, on the other hand, very unequal. But in a state of nature, on the contrary, they would either have nothing to dispute about, or, if necessary, if necessity obliged them to it, nothing would be seen but weakness flying before force, oppressors meeting with no resistance, and those who were oppressed tamely submitting. Behold then, men united and hostile at the same time on one side, if we may be allowed the expression, embracing each other, and on the other endeavoring mutual to wound each other. Laws are the chains, more or less efficacious, which are destined to suspend or to restrain their blows. The prodigious extent of the globe which we inhabit, the different nature of the regions of the earth and of the people who are spread over it, not permitting that all mankind should live under one and the same government, the human race was obliged to divide itself into a certain number of states, distinguished by the difference of those laws to which they are subjected. And that is different states of being. Under one single government, the human race would have been no more than one enfeebled and languishing body, extended without vigor over the surface of the earth. The different governments are so many robust and active bodies. By mutually assisting each other, they form one whole, whose reciprocal action maintains and keeps up motion and life everywhere. Book 2 is we may distinguish three sorts of governments. This is what we're going to be talking about. The Republican, the monarchical, it's a monarchy, and the despotic. In the Republican, the people in a body possesses the sovereign power. Republic and Republican are synonymous. They go together. Republican. Okay? But in the Republican form of government, which is what Article 4, Section 4 is to guarantee, the United States shall guarantee a Republican form of government. We're talking about that form of government. The people in a body possesses the sovereign power. Now, we have where we, the people, have all political power. The people are the sovereign power. Man is sovereign in his own right because we are creations of God. That's what makes us sovereign in our own rights in a state of nature. Now, once you enter into society, as in government, as in take an oath, you become a member of the legislative, executive, judicial, a member of the government, member of the society, then you're bound by certain duties. You're subject to its authority. That's a citizen. That's that next section there of Law of Nations, Section 212. Citizens are the members of a civil society who are bound to perform certain duties and subject to its authority. That's a citizen. Civil servant, the servants, public servants. Okay? In the monarchical, one single person governs by fundamental laws. In the despotic, no other law is known than the will of a master, or rather, of a tyrant. Now that's what our founders have written many times about a despotic government, despotism. Not that there are in the universe only these three kinds of government, or that there are states which belong only and strictly to some one of these forms. For the greatest number of them, the three forms are mixed or blended, the one with the other. Okay, so what we're actually discussing here is the three basic forms of government, and then this is where we get into a confederate republic, because the states have united, formed a union. Okay? So, keep this in mind. You know, there's a lot to cover here in these two books, two volumes. What we would consider chapters is what they call books. But this is where I'm going to be going. Here's to start with. This is this book 2, which is chapter 2. But back then they called them book 2. Books. So volumes and books instead of book and chapter. And then section. But let's continue reading here. For the greatest number of them, the three forms are mixed or blended, the one with the other. Here monarchical inclines to despotism. There the monarchical government is combined with the republican. Elsewhere it is not the whole people, it is only a part of them which makes the laws. But the preceding division is not on that account the less just and exact. The three kinds of government which it includes are so distinguished that they have properly nothing in common. And yet all the governments which we know participate the one in the other. It was therefore necessary to form particular classes of these three kinds, and afterwards determine the laws which are proper for each. It would be easy afterwards to adopt those laws to any particular government according as it might belong more or less to one of those different forms. So we're talking about that fundamental law again. In different states, the laws ought to have relation to their nature, that is to say, to that which constitutes them, and to their principle, or to that which supports them and puts them in motion. An important distinction, the key of an infinite number of laws, and from which the author draws many consequences. The principal laws in relation to the nature of democracy are, see, now we're talking about democracy, are that the people be in some respects the monarch, and in others the subject. That it elect and judge of its magistrates, and that the magistrates on certain occasions pronounce decisions. The nature of monarchy requires that there be between the monarch and the people some body to whom the laws are entrusted, and which ought to be a mediator between the subject and the prince. The nature of despotism requires that the tyrant exercise his authority either by himself alone or by one who represents him. That's sure starting to kind of resemble what we're dealing with today. For those that tuned in late, John over here on YouTube, no worries. This is The Spirit of Laws by Montesquieu. We're going to be going over these forms of government. So let's get down into that. We'll skip the rest of this introduction type stuff. It's going to take a little bit to get through that. Come on. Oh, this is still the analysis. I wonder. Does it have a breakdown? Nope, it does not. Bear with me here as we get through this. I wonder if I were to make it smaller, it would probably be a lot easier on the computer. And a lot faster. Here we go. Oh, I'm still in part of the introduction stuff here. We'll just go. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and start at the very beginning because these are really short. Let's get back up. So the very beginning here, the Spirit of Laws, Book 1 of Laws in General, of the relation of laws to different beings. Laws, in their most general signification, are the necessary relations arising from the nature of things. In this sense, all beings have their laws. The deity, his laws, the material world, its laws, the intelligence superior to man, their laws, and the beasts, their laws, man, his laws. They who assert that a blind fatality produce the various effects we behold in this world talk very absurdly. For can anything be more unreasonable than to pretend that a blind fatality could be productive of intelligent beings? There is then a prime reason, and laws are the relations subsisting between it and different beings and the relations of these to one another. God is related to the universe as creator and preserver. The laws by which he created all things are those by which he preserves them. He acts according to these rules because he knows them. He knows them because he made them. And he made them because they are in relation of his wisdom and power. That is the sovereign. So, the sovereign has the power to create and then has the power to control that which it creates. Since we observe that the world, though formed by the motion of matter and void of understanding, subsists through so long a succession of ages, its motions must be... Pardon me. Let's see. Where did I just left off. Since we observe the world, though formed by the motion of matter and void of understanding, subsists through so long a succession of ages, its motions must certainly be directed by invariable laws. And could we imagine another world? It must also have constant rules, or it would inevitably perish. Thus, the creation, which seems an arbitrary act, supposes laws are invariable as those of the fatality of the atheists. It would be absurd to say that the Creator might govern the world without those rules, since without them it could not subsist. These rules are a fixed and invariable relation. In bodies moved, the motion is received, increased, diminished, or lost, according to the relations of the quantity of matter and velocity. Each diversity is uniformity. Each change is constancy. I was going to say consistency, but it's constancy. Particular intelligent beings may have laws of their own making, but they have some likewise which they never made. Before there were intelligent beings, they were possible. They had therefore possible relations and consequently possible laws. Before laws were made, there were relations of possible justice. To say that there is nothing just or unjust, but what is commanded or forbidden by positive laws, is the same as saying that before the describing of a circle, all the radii were not equal. We must therefore acknowledge relations of justice antecedent to the positive law by which they are established. As for instance, in human societies, if human societies existed, it would be right to conform to their laws. If there were intelligent beings that had received a benefit of another being, they ought to show their gratitude. If one intelligent being had created another intelligent being, the latter ought to continue in its original state of dependence. If one intelligent being injures another, it deserves a retaliation, and so on. So these are fundamental principles. Like an eye for an eye. You cause an injury, you deserve retaliation. Period. But the intelligent world is far from being so well governed as the physical. For though the former has also its laws, which of their own nature are invariable, it does not conform to them so exactly as the physical world. This is because, on the one hand, particular intelligent beings are of a finite nature and consequently liable to error. We're not perfect, right? And on the other, their nature requires them to be free agents. Hence, they do not steadily conform to their primitive laws, and even those of their own instituting, they frequently infringe. Well, that's why we hold people responsible. It's not accountable, it's responsible. Whether brutes be governed by the general laws of motion or by a particular movement, we cannot determine. Be that as it may, they have not a more intimate relation to God than the rest of the material world, and sensation is of no other use to them than in the relation they have either to other particular beings or to themselves. By the allurement of pleasure, they preserve the individual, and by the same allurement, they preserve their species. They have natural laws because they are united by sensation. Positive laws they have none because they are not connected by knowledge, and yet they do not invariably conform to their natural laws. These are better observed by vegetables that have neither understanding nor sense. You know, it's kind of funny here. Think about this. Thou shalt not commit murder. Do vegetables have the ability to commit murder, to kill another vegetable? No. They're not of that type of species or thing. But that's part of the laws of nature. Right? We're not supposed to commit murder. We're not supposed to murder one another. That's the right part of that right to life. We have the right to live freely. We have the right of self-determination, the right of conscience, free will. Because God gave us that. We don't need to seek permission from another man to exercise free will. Because that comes from being in a state of nature as creations of God. So, how can any man or set of men have any authority over another man without violating the fundamental principles of the laws of nature? This principle, right, that free will. Well, but we made a law. No, God made a law that we're all free and equal and independent and endowed by our Creator, because God is the Creator. But see, this is what happens when you get away from God and be a godless society, as you can read from right here. What Montesquieu is talking about right here is you got to have God particle, the principle. Surely man did not create man. How else? I mean, it's the laws of creation. All right. Brutes are deprived of the high advantages which we have, but they have some which we have not. They have not our hopes, but they are without our fears. They are subject, like us, to death, but without knowing it. Even most of them are more attentive than we to self-preservation, and do not make so bad a use of their passions. Man is a physical being, is like other bodies governed by invariable laws. Like gravity. I know a lot of people want to argue about that, but go jump off a building. Sorry, your man is subject to the laws of gravity. Whether you like that or not is irrelevant. Prove me wrong. Go jump off a building and prove to me that you don't smack the ground and you'd be lucky to live. Right? Death happens. You die. Because we're physical. We're in the physical realm here. As an intelligent being, he is incessantly transgresses the laws established by God and changes those of his own instituting. He is left to his private direction, though a limited being and subject, like all finite intelligences, to ignorance and error. Right? We're not perfect. Make mistakes all the time. Okay? And ignorance. Ignorance is not, right? Ignorance is not a derogatory term. Ignorance simply just means you just don't know. It is not meant to be a derogatory term. People have taken that. Ignorance, man. You think I'm ignorant or whatever? Is a derogatory term. I'm calling you names. No. It just means you just don't know. Kind of a weird deal there is the fact that the word ignorant, when you don't even know what the word ignorant means. But one key thing here, he is left to his private direction, though a limited being and subject, like all finite intelligence, to ignorance and error. Not to other men, Even his imperfect knowledge he loses, and as a sensible creature he is hurried away by 1,000 impetuous passions. Oh yeah. Such a being might every instant forget his Creator. God has therefore reminded him of his duty by the laws of religion. Such a being is liable every moment to forget himself. Philosophy has provided against this by the laws of morality. For him to live in society, he might forget his fellow creatures. Legislators have, therefore, by political and civil, there's them civil laws, confined him to his duty. But I ask the question, if God says thou shalt not commit murder, and here in America we are supposed to go by the laws of nature, fundamentally and principally, do we need legislators to make legislation that says, hey, you can't commit murder? Or should we just learn God's law, the fundamental law? I myself don't think we need any body of men to make positive law that says, hey, you can't commit murder, or that you can't lie, or that you can't steal. Because that stuff's should be self-evident. If it's not yours, you don't take it. If it's not the truth, don't speak it. I mean, I don't understand why some people think we need to make a law for that. No. How about we just learn real law? Not shit made up by man. Of the laws of nature. This would be section 2 of book 1. Antecedent to the above mentioned laws are those of nature. So called because they derive their force entirely from our frame and existence. Now, antecedent is before. It comes before all that garbage that was just mentioned above. In order to have a perfect knowledge of these laws, we must consider man before the establishment of society, government. The laws received in such a state would be those of nature. In a state of nature, that man is creation of God, and before government, that's what society is government. We must learn these fundamental principles. As many of the original founders all throughout in the original constitutions in the 1776 era specifically stated that we must have a frequent reoccurrence to fundamental principles. Principles are sometimes a rule, right? A rule of action or whatever, but it's a principle like the rules of mathematics or principles of mathematics. The plus sign, the minus sign, the multiplication sign, division sign, those dictate the correct answer every time, regardless of any of my opinions or feelings. 2 plus 2 equals 4 mathematically, because the principle of mathematics dictates that. I don't get to change those principles. Principles are immutable. No man can change those principles. Now, like in mathematics, there are variables. But when writing a mathematical equation, those variables must be present. If the equation specifically states 2 plus 2 equals, where's the variable? There is no variable. Now, there's some posts out there I've seen over the years, which are story problems that does 2 plus 5 times 6 divided by 3, but there are no variables present, and then people want to apply the variables of PEMDAS to that mathematical equation where they are not present. You know, those brackets, things like that. Those are the variables. Those are indicators, okay, to apply the variables. But if those variables are not there, you cannot apply something that is not there. Doesn't exist there. So, in order to have a perfect knowledge of these laws, we must consider man before the establishment of society. These laws received in such a state would be those of nature. So we are fundamentally and principally in a state of nature. The law which, impressing on our minds the idea of a creator, inclines us towards him, is the first in importance, though not in order, of natural laws. Man in a state of nature would have the faculty of knowing before he had acquired any knowledge plain it is that his first ideas would not be of a speculative nature. He would think of the preservation of his being before he would investigate its origin. Such a man would feel nothing in himself at first but impotency and weakness. His fears and apprehensions would be excessive, as appears from instances where there any necessity of proving it, of savages found in forests, trembling at the motion of a leaf and flying from every shadow. In this state, every man, instead of being sensible of his equality, would fancy himself inferior. There would, therefore, be no danger of their attacking one another. Peace would be the first law of nature. The natural impulse or desire which Hobbes attributes to mankind of subduing one another is far from being well-founded. The idea of empire and dominion is so complex and depends on so many other notions that it could never be the first which occurred to the human understanding. I mean, think about this for a second. You're out in nature, out in the woods, and you come across another man. Do you have to do what that man tells you to do? Does that man have dominion or power over us? Out in the woods. And I'll be honest, I could care less what disguise they're wearing. They're still just a man. Now, I might listen to a man who might advise me that there's a fire and we might need to move because that's the preservation of life. And he's there for good intentions, not evil. So it would depend on what the man is telling us or, asking us to do. And whether or not it's a demand or a request. Hobbes inquires, for what reason go men armed, and have locks and keys to fasten their doors, if they be not naturally in a state of war? That's interesting. I'll also add, how come we have fences? How come we have security cameras? But is it not obvious that he attributes to mankind before the establishment of society what can happen, but in consequence of this establishment, which furnishes them with motives for hostile attacks and self-defense? Isn't that one of the primitive laws of nature, is the right of self-defense? Sure is. Right to defend life. That personal security. Next to a sense of his weakness, man would soon find that of his wants. Hence, another law of nature would prompt him to seek for nourishment. Oh, you mean like food? Then we might have to forage for food, because that is a necessity. Now, unless you're under some sort of special situation, divine situation, most all of us have to have some sort of food and water within a certain amount of days, or we will perish. That's a fact. Okay, typically speaking, it's 3 days without water and 5 days without food. It ain't gonna be pretty after that. Fear, I have observed, would induce men to shun one another. But the marks of his fear being reciprocal would soon engage them to associate. Besides, this association would quickly follow from the very pleasure one animal feels at the approach of another of the same species. Again, the attraction arises from the difference of sexes would enhance this pleasure, and the natural inclination they have for each other would form a third law, attraction of sexes. And there's only two sexes, man and woman, male or female, in the biological realm, biology. Besides the sense or instinct which man possesses in common with brutes, he has the advantage of acquired knowledge, and thence arises a second tie which brutes have not. I'm thinking brutes is actually like animals. Anyone out there can confirm that, although I'm more reading than I am looking at comments. But kind have therefore a new motive of uniting, and a fourth law of nature results from the desire of living in society. Of positive laws, as soon as man enters into a state of society, he loses the sense of his weakness. Equality ceases, and then commences the state of war. Each particular society begins to feel its strength, whence arises a state of war between different nations. The individuals likewise of each society become sensible of their force. Hence, the principal advantages of this society they endeavor to convert to their own, I think that's emolument, which constitutes a state of war between individuals. These two different kinds of states give rise to human laws. Considered as inhabitants of so great a planet, which necessarily contains a variety of nations, they have laws relating to their mutual intercourse, which is what we call the law of nations. Montesquieu refers to the law of nations. Imagine that. As members of a society that must be properly supported, they have laws relating to the governors and the governed, and this we distinguish by the name of politic law, policy. They have also another sort of laws as they stand in relation to each other, by which is understood the civil law. Now, that, again, is Roman civil law. Again, our form of government is a one of a kind. We call those statutes. We don't call that civil law. The law of nations is naturally founded on this principle, that different nations ought in time of peace to do one another all the good they can, and in time of war as little injury as possible, without prejudicing the real interests. The object of war is victory. That of victory is conquest, and that of conquest preservation. From this and the preceding principle, all those rules are derived which constitute the law of nations. All countries have a law of nations, not excepting the Iroquois themselves, though they devour their prisoners. For they send and receive ambassadors and understand the rights of war and peace. The mischief is that their law of nations is not founded on true principles. Besides the law of nations relating to all societies, there's a polity or civil constitution for each particularly considered. No society can subsist without a form of government. The united strength of individuals. That's what a government is. That's what we're saying here. As Gravina well observed, constitutes what we call the body politic. Now, thinking about that, that's actually in the Law of Nations, right in the very beginning there, book 1, I believe it's in chapter 3. But about the people are the sovereign body politic. The general strength may be in the hands of a single person or of many. Some think that nature, having established paternal authority, the most natural government was that of a single person. But the example of paternal authority proves nothing. For if the power of a father relates to a single government, that of brothers after the death of the father, and that of cousins German after the decease of brothers refer to a government of many. The political power necessary comprehends the union of several families. Better is it to say that the government most conformable to nature is that which best agrees with the humor and disposition of the people in whose favor it is established. Now that's a key part to take into consideration when we look at these different forms of government. And some of the attributes of these forms of government may surprise you. The strength of the individuals cannot be united without a conjunction of all their wills. The conjunction of those wills, as Gravina again very justly observes, is what we call the civil state. But that's Gravina. We call that state or state of being. Law in general is human reason, inasmuch as it governs all the inhabitants of the earth. Logic and reason? That's one of them, the number one of the 6 primitive laws of nature. When man is properly organized, he knows the difference between moral good and moral evil. Inasmuch as it governs all the inhabitants of the earth, the political and civil laws of each nation ought to be only the particular cases in which human reason is applied. They should be adapted in such a manner to the people for whom they are framed, that it should be a great chance if those of one nation suit another. Now, this is why it is said that statutes in American Jurisprudence, Volume 16, Constitutional Law, Constitutional Law, Section 2, that statutes are for government civil conduct. And that statutes, this is that sovereign power delegated to the legislature, is for creating and affecting corporations. It's not, statutes, we already have a fundamental law, the common law. We're like murder, rape, kidnapping, abortion, even abortion is part of the common law. Breaches of the peace, which are assaults and batteries. That's all from the common law. Same thing with due process of law, comes from the common law. Now, when you go to Roman civil law, which is a different body of law, like, a government in a box, you pack up the common law, which includes constitutions, because this particular constitution as law of the land is common law of the land. So we pack that all up, that body of law, common law, and put that over here in this box, and we break open the box with Roman civil law, the code. You're not going to find constitutions, because that's not how Roman civil law works. It is the law, the whole thing. There is no other parts to it. It's just the code is the law. For example, in that Code of Civil Procedure Act I found, it creates the Supreme Court and all inferior courts. Per the Constitution, it creates a Supreme Court, and the legislative branch has the power to create inferior courts. See the difference? How the courts are created under common law through the Constitution. Under Roman civil law, it's directly from the code itself. There is no Constitution. So again, this is a fundamental law. That's the difference. As a jurisdiction, a body of law. You can't have both. That's the thing. You can't have both. You can't have two fundamental laws trying to meld together, because you're destroying, especially when it comes to Roman civil law, it destroys the common law. It is opposed to the common law. Bouvet's Law Dictionary, 1856. See law, civil. It is opposed to the law of nations, the laws of nature, and the common law. That's right. Totally different body of law. It doesn't give a rat's ass about the law of nations, the laws of nature, or the common law. It is a separate body of law as a fundamental law. We really need to comprehend that. Now this key phrase right here, they should be adapted in such a manner to the people for whom they are framed. Personal jurisdiction. And should be a great chance if those of one nation suit another. They should be in relation to the nature and principle of each government, whether they form it, as may be said of political laws, or whether they support it, as in the case of civil institutions. They should be in relation to the climate of each country, to the quality of its soil, to its situation and extent, to the principal occupation of the natives, whether husbandmen, huntsmen, or shepherds. They should have relation to the degree of liberty which the Constitution will bear, to the religion of the inhabitants, to their inclinations, riches, numbers, commerce, manners, and customs. In fine, they have relations to each other, as also to their origin, to the intent of the legislator, and to the order of things on which they are established, in all of which different lights they ought to be considered. This is what I have undertaken to perform in the following work. These relations I shall examine, since all these together constitute what I call the spirit of laws. Now sometimes You'll hear that. It's pretty rare these days. But I think it's another one of those frequent reoccurrence to fundamental principles. In the spirit of the law. What does that mean? Is it good? Or is it evil? Now, like I found in my Founder's Bible about legislation, we're supposed to ask the question, what is the evil this intends to prohibit? That would be in the spirit of the law. In making anything, right? Because we're all supposed to be free will here, but we're ignorant and we make errors. Sometimes there's an evil motive behind some of the things that we do. And if there's an evil motive there, then that's criminal in nature. From nature. That you're attempting to deceive, deprive, to take from one man that doesn't belong to you. Or you have the authority to take. So, I have not separated the political from the civil institutions, as I do not pretend to treat of laws, but of their spirit. And as this spirit consists in the various relations to which the laws may bear to different objects, it is not so much my business to follow the natural order of laws as that of these relations and objects. I shall first examine. You know what? I'm probably missing some questions here. What's the difference between a country and territory? That's it. They're one and the same. The territory of Idaho is a country. What's the difference between a Confederate Republic form of government and a constitutional republic form of... There's no such thing as a constitutional republic. That's the problem. There's no such thing as a constitutional republic. Just like there's no such thing as a representative democracy. What's going on there? Right? I know. This is one reason why we need to learn, and I cannot believe that there are certain individuals out there who claim to know law stuff, don't even know the fundamental principles of our Confederate Republic, that we are not a constitutional republic. We are a Confederate Republic, which we're about to discover. It doesn't matter if it's in the paperwork or not. That doesn't change facts of law. There's no such thing as a constitutional republic. No such thing. It does not exist. That is shit made up. Now, again, I'll be honest, due to my own ignorance, I used to call us a constitutional republic. Until I started reading and studying and find out that we're a Confederate republic. What do you think United States of America means? What do you think it means in the preamble when it says in order to form a more perfect union? We already had a perfect union. The Constitution was to create a more perfect union. Union is a confederacy, a union of states. Now, republic by itself, yes, there are many different kinds of republic. So again, what kind of a republic do we have? We have a Confederate republic. We have a union, a confederacy. All right, so right, exactly. Shit made up, but we're learning, right? We're curing our ignorance. And like I've said for years, reading means reading. And then when we read, we must comprehend. And once we can comprehend, then we can understand. Stand in agreement. And those who know how to read, comprehend what they read, and then understand it, know when somebody else does not. Those of sound mind, possessing logic and reason, shall come to a reasonable conclusion based in reality. Those that do not come to a reasonable conclusion based in reality, facts, evidence, truth, are insane. They are not of sound mind. And per the laws of nature, we are to shun the insane. What may be harmful to us. Hurts my brain sometimes, especially after I have laid this out to them before. I have provided the evidence of this before, and they still insist to the contrary. So, I shall first examine the relations which laws bear to the nature and principle of each government. And as this principle has a strong influence on laws, I shall make it my study to understand it thoroughly. This is where I'm at, and where we all need to be. That we are going to study this thoroughly, so that we thoroughly understand it. Not just comprehend it, but understand it. That we make this the truth, facts, and evidence. And anything that comes in conflict with this would be void for any effect, because we now possess knowledge. And using logic and reason, we have the ability to come to a reasonable conclusion based in reality, because we have studied. We have gained this knowledge. So we actually know what we're talking about. So, again, I admit that I used to call our form of government a constitutional republic. But through my own ignorance, lack of knowledge, I've studied. Now, I know the difference. Not just that I know that we're a Confederate republic, but I actually know the difference between a monarchy and a Confederate republic, and a aristocracy or democracy. But this is so key, folks. Knowledge is power. Without the knowledge, we have no power. My people shall perish for a lack of knowledge. and more specifically, the lack of knowledge of God's laws, the laws of nature, which is kind of what he was talking about here. So let's continue on. And if I can but once establish it, the laws will soon appear to flow thence as from their source. I shall proceed afterwards to other and more particular relations. This is where we're going to get into forms of government. This will be book 2. Of laws directly derived from the nature of government. Of the nature of 3 different governments. There are 3 species of government: republican, monarchical, and despotic. In order to discover their nature, it is sufficient to recollect the common notion, which supposes 3 definitions, or rather 3 facts. That a republican government is that in which the body, or only a part of the people, is possessed of the supreme power. Now, that would be a republican form of government. In our republican form of government, the people retained all of the political power. We delegated some of the power that we already possess over certain subjects that we as the people don't have the time to take care of. That's what we instituted government for, was to secure our rights and essentially to regulate commerce and war. Federalist 45. That's it. Honestly, that's it. To keep it simple, to break it down so Grandma can understand it, government was instituted to secure our rights, our God-given rights from the laws of nature, from God, right? To make sure that those rights never get infringed. And then, because one man in himself cannot defend other than basically himself and what's directly in front of him. Can one man defend against invasion from, say, Mexico to Texas? No. I think not. So this is what the problem was with the original Confederacy, our Confederation, was that we didn't have a way to provide protection of the new nation from invasion, or even internal insurrection, domestic violence, internal, turning us back into a monarchy. Funny that our founders had forethought to put something in place so that we, the people, could, defend ourselves from converting our government, hijacking our government, and turning us back into a monarchy. All right. So, under the republican form of government is that which the body or only a part of the people is possessed of the supreme power. Monarchy, that in which a single person governs by fixed and established laws. Now this is where we got to comprehend about the monarchy. And then there are basically 2 branches of government that the king sits in both. And which we will see and read here shortly about how a monarchy does war. A despotic government, that in which a single person directs everything by his own will and caprice. So even the monarchy can turn into a despotic government. This is what they were talking about. Our founders were talking about in the Declaration of Independence, the Declaration of the Cause and Necessity of Taking Up Arms in July of 1775. This despotic government, this despotism, this absolute despotism that we had petitioned in the most humblest terms and only been met with repeated injuries, that their grievances were not properly, lawfully dealt with. They were not addressed. That's when it became a despotic government. This is what I call the nature of each government. We must now inquire into those laws which directly conform to this nature, and consequently are the fundamental institutions. Again, we're talking about the basics here, the very beginning, the groundwork of the formation, the fundamental parts of governments. In nature, in a state of nature, in the spirit of the law. Of the Republican government and the laws in relation to democracy. When the body of the people is possessed of the supreme power, it is called a democracy. When the supreme power is lodged in the hands of a part of the people, it is then an aristocracy. In a democracy, the people are in some respects the sovereign, and in others, the subject. There can be no exercise of sovereignty but by their suffrages, which are their own will. Now, the sovereign's will is the sovereign himself. The laws, therefore, which establish the right of suffrage are fundamental to this government. And, indeed, it is as important to regulate in a republic in what manner, by whom, to whom, and concerning what suffrages are to be given, as it is in a monarchy to know who is the prince and after what manner he ought to govern. Leibniz, whatever, says that at Athens, a stranger who intermeddled in the assemblies of the people was punished with death. This is because such a man usurped the rights of sovereignty. Think about that. Athens, a stranger who intermeddled in the assemblies of the people, was punished with death. No. Suffrage is meaning that you have the right to vote, that you have a say in it. That's what the suffrage does not mean suffer. But hey. Okay, so it is an essential point to fix the number of citizens who are to form the public assemblies. Notice that it goes from man to people to citizens, and that citizens are the who of the form of government, of the public assemblies. All right. So, The citizens are the public servants. That's also Book 1, Chapter 19, subsection 212, citizens. Otherwise, it would be uncertain whether the whole or only a part of the people had given their votes. Again, that's the suffrage, the right of suffrage. Okay? So, this is in part what we talk about is our representatives and senators in the House. The House consists of two parts, the Senate and the House of Representatives. At Sparta, the number was fixed at 10,000. But Rome, designed by Providence to rise from the weakest beginnings to the highest pitch of grandeur, Rome, doomed to experience all the vicissitudes of fortune, Rome, who had sometimes all her inhabitants without her walls, and sometimes all Italy and considerable part of the world within them. Rome, I say, never fixed the number. And this was one of the principal causes of her ruin. The people in whom the supreme power resides ought to have the management of everything within their reach. That which exceeds their abilities must be conducted by their ministers. Okay, that's exactly what's going on here with our Confederate Republic. It's things that we cannot take care of by ourselves as one man. We have a body of men. But at all times, we the people have the right to alter, reform, or abolish anything that they create. That's a power retained by the people, so that way we didn't have a runaway government. That the people remained free, that government, we didn't slip back into a despotic government. That we didn't slip back into a monarchy and under the absolute rule of a king. Again, our form of government, essentially, is a one-of-a-kind. Although, we're going to discover that it's really not. A Confederate Republic is actually, in the past, was kind of a popular one. What's happened is the people have failed to stand up and come together and defend. The people in whom the supreme power resides ought to have the management of everything within their reach. That which exceeds their abilities must be conducted by their ministers, what we call representatives of the people. Whether they're senators or representatives, doesn't matter. But they cannot properly be said to have their ministers without the power of nominating them. It is therefore a fundamental maxim in this government that the people should choose their ministers, that is, their magistrates. Now, wait a minute. Now we're talking like judges type thing. But are we talking about the assembly also being ministers or magistrates? Remember, this is under a republican form of government here. They have occasion, as well as monarchs, and even more so, to be directed by a council or senate. One of those things we kept, I guess, talking about president having his own privy council, the governor having his own privy council. So, they have occasion, as well as monarchs, even more so, to be directed by a council or senate. But to have a proper confidence in these, they should have the choosing of them members. Whether the election be made by themselves, as at Athens, or by some magistrate deputed for that purpose, as on certain occasions was customary at Rome. See, we are actually supposed to be conducting our own elections. The legislature was tasked with the duty to fix the time and place, but how elections were done, that's off limits to the legislature. You're supposed to show up. The people nominate, as long as they're a qualified elector, that they own land, that they're of a certain age, those kinds of things, to run for that particular office. Some offices require them to have been in service in a lower ranking type system of the government before they can run for, say, federal level. You'll read that in there. There must not be an inhabitant or resident of blah, 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 blah for a certain amount of time. What that means, see, this is where you change your status from inhabitant, one of the people, to a citizen. Is when you take that oath of office and become a member of the legislative, executive, and judicial, you have to spend time in service, just like in the military, time and grade, in order to be promoted, to work up the ranks, rank and file, okay? So just like in the military, just like in government, you can't just come out of the woods and say, you know what, I'm going to run for Senate in Congress. Well, you got to work down here first and get the hang of things, learn a few things about how, especially parliamentary law, the common law, how legislative assemblies are supposed to work, those kinds of things before we entrust you with the power of it on a national level. So the people are extremely well qualified for choosing those whom they are to entrust with part of their authority. They have only to be determined by things to which they cannot be strangers, and by facts that are obvious to sense, common sense. They can tell when a person has fought many battles and been crowned with success. They are, therefore, capable of electing a general. They can tell when a judge is assiduous in his office, gives general satisfaction, and has never been charged with bribery. This is sufficient for choosing a, I wonder if that's protector. Praetor. They are struck with the magnificence of riches of a fellow citizen. No more is requisite from electing an aedile. Now remember, this was actually originally written in French, and it's been translated from French to English. So these are facts of which they can have better information in a public forum than a monarch in his palace. See, and that's part of that fundamental difference between a republic and a monarchy, is we actually kind of get to know these people in our local community. Let's see. But are they capable of conducting an intricate affair, of seizing and improving the opportunity and critical moment of action? No. This surpasses their abilities. And what we're talking about is the abilities of a monarch. Because he's not around. Not on a local level. Sits up on there in his high post there, on his pedestal. Should we doubt the people's natural capacity in respect to the discernment of merit? We need only cast an eye on the series of surprising elections made by Athenians and Romans, which no one surely will attribute to hazard. We know that though the people of Rome assumed the right of raising plebeians to public offices, yet they never would exert this power. And though at Athens the magistrates were allowed by the law of Aristides, to be elected from all the different classes of inhabitants. Again, notice these words that are being used. These are statuses. It's funny how It says inhabitants, but it never once does it say national. Just wanted to point that out. There never was a case, says Xenophon, when the common people petitioned for employments which could endanger either their security or their glory. Sounds like they petitioned with grievances. As most citizens have sufficient ability to choose, though unqualified to be chosen, so the people, though capable of calling others to an account for their administration, are incapable of conducting the administration themselves. The public business must be carried on with a certain motion, neither too quick nor too slow, but the motion of the people is always either too remiss or too violent. Sometimes with 100,000 arms they overturn all before them, and sometimes with 100,000 feet they creep like insects. In a popular state, the inhabitants are divided into certain classes. It is in the manner of making this division that great legislators have signalized themselves, and it is on this the duration and prosperity of democracy have ever depended. Servius Tullus followed the spirit of aristocracy in the distribution of his classes. We find in Livy and in Dionysius, Helicanarsis, in what manner he lodged the right of suffrage in the hands of the principal citizens. He had divided the people of Rome into 193 centuries, which formed 6 classes, and ranking the rich, who were in smaller numbers, in the first centuries, and those in middling circumstances, centuries, we're talking classes of people, who were more numerous in the next, and he flung the indigent multitude into the last. And as each century had but one vote, it was property rather than numbers that decided the election. Imagine that. Solon divided the people of Athens into 4 classes. In this he was directed by the spirit of democracy, his intention not being to fix those who were to choose, but such as were eligible. Therefore, leaving every citizen the right of election, he made the judges eligible from each of those 4 classes. But the magistrates he ordered to be chosen only out of the first 3, consisting of persons of easy fortunes. As the division of those who had a right of suffrage is a fundamental law in republics, so the manner of giving this suffrage is another fundamental. The suffrage by lot is natural to democracy, as that by choice is to aristocracy. Now, I want to remind people about a democracy is the fact that anything could be put to a vote. Okay? This is one of the fundamental differences between our Confederate Republic, is we go by the common law, suits at common law, 7th article of the Bill of Rights, or also known as 7th Amendment. So, we don't put rights to a vote, we have fundamental law that dictates the correct answer. We have maxims of law from the common law. That is the origin of the common law itself. Maxims of law and customs. That is the real common law. Not case law stare decisis. The suffrage by lot is a method of electing that offends no one, but animates each citizen with the pleasing hope of serving his country. Okay? So again, that right of suffrage is the right to vote. Okay? So, this is one of the fairest way to do things, right? Everybody gets to cast one ballot. And the one with the most ballot wins. It's just that simple. Not everybody wins in like today's time. And well, nobody really wins. We're all winners. No. That is reality, folks. If there is to be a winner, there has to be a loser. And it would be one who loses and is not necessarily considered a loser in terms of today slang. Just means you lost. You didn't win. So the reciprocal of you didn't win is you lost. You lost the election. So what? That doesn't make you any less of a man. It just means either A, the people don't know enough about you, so try again. Now, if you keep doing it over and over and expecting different results when the results never change, the people just they don't want to support you. They don't believe in you. They don't want to elect you. Well, you might take that into consideration. Okay. As a division of those who have a right of suffrage is a fundamental law in republics, so the manner of giving this suffrage is another fundamental. The suffrage by lot is natural to democracy, and that by choice is to aristocracy. The suffrage by lot is a method of electing that offends no one. Okay. Yet, as this method is in itself defective, it has been the endeavor of the most eminent legislators to regulate and amend it. Solon made a law at Athens that military employments should be conferred by choice, but that senators and judges should be elected by lot. The same legislator ordained that civil magistracies attended with great expense should be given by choice and others by lot. Now, we do have, like the Supreme Court, or like federal courts. The president is to nominate, and the Senate is to appoint. So you have from the executive and the legislative. So they have to go through the ones that the president nominate. I mean, they can deny as many as he nominates, but at some point they have to appoint somebody to fill these positions. Now, we actually got to experience that in our lifetime here with two different people being appointed or nominated and then selected by the Senate into the Supreme Court of the United States. So we got to see that process play out. Amy Coney Barrett and what's his name? It's on the tip of my tongue. Anywho, we actually got to see that process. Okay? The same legislature ordained that civil magistracies attended with great expense should be given by choice and the others by lot. Now, we actually, right, Kavanaugh, thank you, Diesel D's. Kavanaugh was the other one. So, the thing is throughout history, for our Confederate Republic, per the common law, we're supposed to elect pretty much everybody. Our justices of the peace, our representatives, our sheriffs. The only thing that really gets appointed is on the federal level. Nominated and appointed by Senate, Supreme Court justices and justices of the federal courts. But they're supposed to be very limited in one, territorial jurisdiction. And number two, definitely personal and subject matter jurisdiction per the Constitution. In order, however, to amend the suffrage by lot, he made a rule that none but those who presented themselves should be elected, that the person elected should be examined by judges, and that everyone should have a right to accuse him if he were unworthy of the office. This participated at the same time of the suffrage by lot and that by choice. When the time of their magistracy had expired, they were obliged to submit to another judgment in regard to their conduct. Persons utterly unqualified must have been extremely backward in giving in their names to be drawn by lot. Well, this is one reason why we, in our form of government, where we the people retain the power of our common law grand juries, that we can actually, in our grand juries, we can actually do that, prosecutions by information. But that's what it says. If we read there, is a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. That is upon their own investigation. See, we the people have the right. We retain that power. That power has been stripped of us. But it's time to reassemble the people and take back our powers. Time to reassemble government de jure. So the law which determines the manner of giving suffrage is likewise fundamental in a democracy. It is a question of some importance whether the suffrages ought to be public or secret. Cercio observes that the laws which rendered them secret towards the close of the Republic were the cause of its decline. That's right. This needs to be done directly out in front of everybody like it used to be. You show up, you nominate, you cast a ballot. The ballots are counted right there directly in front of us, and it is announced right there directly in front of us. There's no ballot stuffing, there's no chances of election fraud or anything like that when everybody's right there. And I know that might be a little bit difficult due to the level of the population. But hey, we want to get rid of that possible chances of any kind of election fraud. I think that's something we ought to do. Let's get back to some fundamental principles. You show up, you get to cast a ballot. That's it. The people's suffrages ought doubtless to be public, and this should be considered as fundamental law of democracy. The lower class ought to be directed by those of higher rank, and restrained within bounds by the gravity of eminent personages. Hence, by rendering the suffrages secret in the Roman Republic, all was lost. It was no longer possible to direct a populace that sought its own destruction. But when the body of the nobles are to vote in an aristocracy, or in a democracy, the Senate, as the business is then only to prevent intrigues, the suffrages cannot be too secret. Intriguing in a Senate is dangerous. It is dangerous also in the body of nobles, but not so among the people, whose nature is to act through passion. In countries where they have no share in the government, we often see them as much inflamed on account of an actor as ever they could be for the welfare of the state. This misfortune of a republic is when intrigues are not at end, which happens when the people are gained by bribery and corruption. In this case, they grow indifferent to public affairs, and averse becomes the predominant passion. Avarice. Unconcerned about the government and everything belonging to it, they quietly wait for their hire. It is likewise a fundamental law in democracies that the people should have the sole power to enact laws. And yet there are 1,000 occasions on which it is necessary the Senate should have the power of decreeing. Nay, it is frequently proper to make some trial of a law before it is established. The constitutions of Rome and Athens were excellent. The decrees of the Senate had the force of laws for the space of a year, but did not become perpetual till they were ratified by the consent of the people. Now that's an interesting thing. Should everything that the legislature makes be submitted to the people for approval or rejection? Or should it remain in the power of the grand jury and the petite jury? I really think that should be something that's done. That everything, all legislation, should be submitted to the people for ratification. All right, well, now that I get a little bit of, I was reading from my books, and this is a 1900 version of The Spirit of Laws by Montesquieu versus this little book here. So we're going to leave off right here on section 3. But yeah, I actually have the books, which are quite old. This little bit older version, and it's in a little bit of disarray. You know, it's old. This particular printed version here, I think it was 1878 when this book was published. So, yeah, it seems to be the 1900 revised edition. Seems to be a little bit more lengthy. Well, I guess not really. Well, yeah. Yes and no. Maybe not. But yeah. So, I will. The book is falling apart. I will encourage people to be on Thursday night's call, on the National Assembly call, because I'm definitely going to propose that I read from this. It won't be as much as everything that I covered tonight. And then, of course, next Monday I'll pick back up right where we just left off on Section 3. Because I think that this is extremely important for everybody to learn. At least those that are willing to learn. But again, we need to reassemble government de jure. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about this. Flat out. That is what all political power is inherent in the people. We have to reassemble the people. Government de jure. So here on the national-assembly.net, that is a hyphen. I don't know why people keep calling it a dash. It's called a hyphen. But anywho's, national-assembly.net. This is basically an educational thing, just like Kirk's Law Corner is about education. Okay? But this is education on what we need to do governmental-wise. So, right here, this is the homepage. Conference call info, Thursday nights. Again, I will reiterate. Please download and install the app. Free conference call app. It's free. Whether it's on your smartphone, here's a link to a YouTube video. Okay, how to do that. Simply put, go to your app store and download and install the app. Here's a tutorial on desktop computer on YouTube. Now, this is the link to the meeting. Now, if you download and install the app, I was reading a comment here. Sorry. If you download and install the app, once you click on this link once, it will store it in your app. So you don't have to come back here to click on the link to join the conference call. It will store it in the free conference call app. And all you have to do is click on that, join that meeting. Okay? Other than that, there's the forums and blogs. We got some resources here that you can look at, the 10 steps to how to assemble, 10 steps to an assembly. There's its National Assembly's Michigan's handbook. Here's the Citizens Training Manual, the Military Training Manual, 2000-25, or hyphen 2020, 2000-25. Jason from his Hardline has a couple. They put a couple of links to some videos on here. Under the forums and blog tab here, okay, you can go into the National Assembly forums and look for your state. Right here. The 50 nation states, right here in the middle. Okay, you scroll down just a little bit, and this section says the 50 nation states. Find your state, go in there and introduce yourself. You got introductions, then you got the general chat, and then you got historical documents. Okay, so there's your two places. One, you get on the National Assembly call on Thursday nights, introduce yourself. Okay, keep in mind that the first part is all the National Assembly business stuff. And then the second part is supposed to be the educational discussion, that type of stuff. Please make sure that you keep yourself muted unless you intend to speak. A lot of people seem to have a hard time comprehending that. We don't want to hear your TV in the background or you and your friend sitting there talking about whatever. Please pay attention to what you're doing. I know that people make mistakes. It happens, but try to seriously pay attention to what you're doing over there. It's disruptive to the meeting. Other than that, if you have any questions, Content Manager 1, the number 1 itself, at yahoo.com to get in contact with any kind of a coordinator or moderator or any other ComSec for the individual states if you're looking to get involved. But need to be on these calls. You need to be in there and get known. Get onto the forums and start making some comments and introductions. Okay? Now, for me, my stuff, KirksLawCorner.com. On the home page here now, I want to remind people that I have changed the link, changed Telegram channel from public to private, and it's so much better in the sense that there is absolutely no spam. There is no bots, none of that crap. The drawback is you have to have a link to join it. So I'm going to have to get with Miles, I have not yet, and get the link changed for the Telegram channel. But right here in the upper left-hand corner, these are links to my social media. Again, Telegram is the predominant media app that I use. I put a lot of stuff out on Telegram. Otherwise, Rumble and YouTube are just for doing lives. X, again, come to find out, which is weird, according to them and according to my Streamlabs here, when I go to try to broadcast to X, it says, oh, you have to have a premium subscription. But yet I can go onto my phone and I can still go live from my phone. So apparently X doesn't want me broadcasting live out there through my desktop. But through my cell phone is okay. Quite interesting. But still, again, I want to remind people that Telegram is my predominant medium, whatever. So, but yeah, Facebook page, these are all Kirk's Law Corner, except for X is my Kirk Pendergrass, okay? That's just the way I set it up to begin with. So, the P here, that's for Patreon. That'll take you to my Patreon. Now, anything through Patreon is done through Patreon. And I have Tier 1 and Tier 1 and Tier 2 set up for digital donations. Because Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, all that, shut me down. So, that's what I have set up to help support me here in my endeavors and what I'm working on and what I'm doing right now. For free, right here, live. Every Monday night, except for when I take it off. Don't forget the free educational series on my YouTube channel. Okay, there's a free educational series in there. Highly recommend people watch those. Tier 3, Wednesday night workshop. That's Wednesday nights, where I typically go over some of the things that I'm going through, my court cases, how to effectively defend ourselves, doing the paperwork. Random discussions. We sometimes don't really cover much of anything. We just kind of shoot the shit and talk about law stuff. And sometimes those turn into some pretty good meetings. It's amazing how God works there, and that's kind of how I work, Never know where things are going to go with God. So, and then for those that are looking for help, one-on-one time with me, that's Tier 4. I see many people posting comments out here about how they're going through this, that, and the other, and what should they do? What can they do? Well, go over to Patreon, get signed up on Tier 4, go look at the very first post on my Patreon channel, and look for the link to Calendly and set up a one-on-one meeting. I have set for Tuesdays and Saturdays, which kind of makes it difficult to go camping, especially on Saturdays. But I will typically let somebody know if they set up a one-on-one for Saturday. But anyways, that's what that's for. People looking for help, that's how I am making myself available for those that are looking for direct help, one-on-one time with me. Okay? Otherwise, any of those regular type donations, postal money orders, regular money orders, cash, wrapped aluminum foil, gold, silver, coinage, any of that, send that to me over at the office, 6477 West Fairview Avenue. Suite G is in Golf, Boise, Idaho 83704. And a shout out to Miles for doing this website. You can click on that down here, website by Miles at Davina.website, if you're interested in having him help you out a little bit over there, whatever. But yeah, just a shout out to Miles for all that. Thank you, brother. Library tab. That's where I got some of them books in there. highly recommend coming in here and doing some reading, downloading and reading. Links also is the same thing as that up there. There's Patreon, there's Rumble, there's YouTube, there's Facebook. See, Telegram, that's going to change. It's already changed. This link will not work anymore. I also still have the KLC American Patriots master channel on Telegram where I was doing Friday nights. But I'll tell you, it wears on me doing Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And it didn't seem like there was too much interest in the Friday nights. I'd get just a few people in there. But nonetheless, it's still up. It's still there. But it's pretty much same as these links right here in the upper left-hand corner here, with the exception of the KLC American Patriots. Okay. So I want to thank my supporters out there and those that have made some donations over here. I appreciate it. Greatly appreciate that. There's some other stuff here, that petition on the website, kirkslawcorner.com, the one I drafted for foreign invasion, dealing with foreign invasion. Just to kind of show people that's how it's done. But I also have videos on that, how to do the petition and that kind of stuff. So, knowledge is power, folks. You got to learn. We have to learn. Plain and simple. All right? God bless. Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful night. And those in Patreon, we'll see you Wednesday night. And again, Thursday night, the National Assembly call. Okay? Let's get the people rounded up. We need to reassemble government de jure and take back our power. You know, for all those out there that keep sitting around talking about how Trump's going to save us, or people believe that Trump is going to come save us. Trump told us straight from the very beginning in his inauguration speech that he was putting the power back into the people's hands. What power do you think he was referring to? All political power is inherent in the people. We have the right to alter, reform, or abolish anything at any time we deem it necessary. But we have to assemble the people. We have to reassemble government de jure. In order for government de facto to go away, which is they're just providing these 19 essential governmental services until the people get off their ass and reassemble. So, put the blame where it belongs, square on the people. We're in this situation because the people haven't reassembled. Start pointing the finger where it belongs, on the people. So, God bless, have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next week.